Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your Compliance Masterclass. I'm your host, Adam Robin, with the Private Practice Owners Club. Got my guy here, Daniel Hirsch, with Risk and Compliance Analytics. And we're going to talk about the one topic everyone wants to hear more about, AI, because it's taken over, Daniel. It's taken
Good.
over. It's coming. I feel like like I have more and more conversations with people about AI and how people are leveraging it, integrating it. Some people are getting a little bit some people are usually using it in a good way, right? Some people are not, right? Some people are like kind of slap them on the wrist because I know that there's some people specifically. I heard the other day that somebody was using ChatGPT to document their plan of cares, and I just thought about you, and I was like, Daniel would flip upside down if he heard this. So I know other people are doing that. So if we're going to
Yeah.
leverage AI in our practice and our business, we want to do it the right way. We want to do it the safe way. We want to make sure that we leverage it in a way that doesn't put us at a compliance risk. So, Daniel, I'd love to hear your take on AI and what people need to know about it.
All right. Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you, Adam. I know this is our last episode in the Compliance Masterclass series, so very exciting. Um, Today, I think, you mentioned AI. We're going to talk about probably one of the biggest shifts happening in, forget the world, right? In healthcare right now, AI is everything you need to know is it's a tool. PTs have a tool at their advantage. It can improve documentation, efficiency, patient care, but there are obvious risks. I recently I had the privilege of attending the CSM conference from the APTA in Anaheim last week, and I got to tell you, probably goodness, 75% of the session spoke about AI in some way, right? And the problem is that research is always kind of lagging behind. So a lot of the content was outdated already, meaning like technology was already available, a lot of what they're talking about. So I want to answer how to use it responsibly, ethically, and really in a compliant manner. And I think a lot of people, maybe you're hearing this too, they're saying, well, AI is it going to replace therapists and maybe bad therapists? Just kidding. But AI tools could, they could help PTs be better BTs. And let's say you forgot a component in your note, forget the chat GP thing you mentioned a second ago, but it reminds you, it provides insight into the coding, how you're billing, the accuracy of it, and obviously a lot of administrative tasks that should not be so manual anyway nowadays. When Medicare also goes on record to say that, how long and tedious documentation really could be, the obvious reflex to anyone should be, okay, fine, I'll solve for that. I don't want to deal with this. The profession is so heavily regulated that you got to make sure that you're not violating like HIPAA privacy and security rules or billing rules and stuff like that. So think of this like, I don't know if you're a car guy, but like, you have emission tests every year or so, right? And people, you go, you don't cheat, you follow the rules. I don't know if you remember this, but it stuck with me when Volkswagen a couple years ago, like 10 years ago, got caught with emissions. They got penalized, huge penalties. And the point I'm making is that like when you're using AI, you got to make sure that the vendor they got to be reliable. They have to have a really good reputation. And this is not a component of, hey, let's just figure out a way to cheat the system to be able to use technology
Mm,
to do that. You don't want that. So let me explain that a little bit better. So there's really three concepts that you have to understand from a regulatory standpoint. First, patient privacy and security, that's what we're dealing with. So the tool that you're using for AI, it has to interact with the patient data, but it has to still meet your privacy and security standards, right? So that's under federal law. Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services, you have to be able to secure it in transmission as well as at rest. REST authorized users have to be maintained, right? So you can't just let anybody have access to this. And also you have to have a BAA in place. So if you're thinking about like how you're processing notes and intake forms and schedule data, that's all great. That's fantastic. BAAs are, I know a lot of people complain about, well, do I really have to track it down? It's probably one of the easiest audits you can do. Having having a BAA in place is something that everyone that you do business with, Adam, has to have. And the reason
mm.
is because it safeguards, right? It protects you and the business. From a vendor standpoint, you're transferring that responsibility back, that they have to maintain basic safeguards. Also, for like breaches and reportability, you have to have accountability, and BAA specifically outline who is responsible for what. So that's very easy to do. If anyone does not know how to do it, Again, this is basic 101 of being in business. And then finally, I think the third component is really for billing and, you know, what's medically necessary. So Medicare, in my opinion, they don't care about whether AI was used. They really care about outcomes. And I'll say that again. As professionals, I think we're being held to the same standards that we've always been held to, and that's are you providing medically skilled necessary services? Is that taking place? Is the documentation accurate? Is it individualized? And does it really reflect like the actual care that's being provided? Are you objectively improving your patients throughout the episode of care? If you can't answer that, then A, you probably shouldn't be a therapist, but B, you're just not ready. You're just not ready to be able to be responsible in either outpatient private practice or not having someone watch over you 24/7. AI generated documentation, in my opinion, is not the problem. The issue is when therapists let the AI generate templates, it becomes repetitive, and it's just not clinically justified anymore. And as an auditor, I'll tell you, it's the indifference problem. You know it right away. When therapists just don't care, AI is also going to reflect that because it's whatever you put in, you're going to get the same thing back. So if you're putting quality in, you're going to just enhance what you're already putting. So
Mm.
that's, I think, one of the biggest problems we see in this realm, and it's a human problem, but it's going to be exemplified right with AI. So the safest, highest value I think that people listening will get is probably not a surprise because it's been around for years. And that's really like from a burnout standpoint. So documentation, I made the joke about Medicare. They don't care if you're using this. They just want to know is it still objective? Is it still meeting their definitions, right? The manuals didn't change. They're all the same. But yet we get a fantastic technology to use now. So if you're drafting your notes, you're drafting language, is suggesting clinical phrasing, it's going to like flag certain things that are missing. That's fantastic. It validates accuracy. It confirms medically necessary language. That's really, really good. So it's not taking away, the notes are not really taking away what your clinical judgment should be. Even if it's
Hmm.
AI assisted, your license, and I think therapists forget this when they're documenting, that your license is still on the line when you're documenting every time, not just when you're touching the patient, but when you're recording what took place. So this is just the next chapter two of, right? We've done this for many, many years. Now this is just the next chapter that you have a great technology tool to be able to make it faster, quicker, smarter. That's great. But your license is on the line every time you're signing that off. From an audit standpoint, I can tell you, I love that this is available. Replacing analytics and all the days of calculating KPI, you know how important this is to owners. You need the data. So now instead, you could just say, okay, I know where it is. I just need to interpret it and execute on the data. So you got units and coding and you know utilization outliers and all these things. It's all to your advantage now. Um, I think also one of the I've said many times before, peer to peer, forget that. Those days are done. Um, you know, Audits can also be accomplished without hiring people like me, which is nice. Obviously, there's a cost of going this route, right? Technology is going to cost something, but the options are there now. And if you could identify risk early on before they become major problems, I think that's the beauty of risk management. So if people don't want to take advantage of it, I think that's fine, but they have to realize this is the reality of where everything is going, and you should take advantage. Um, I think something where I don't really live a lot, but for marketing and patient engagement, right, with these tools, there's a lot of leverage. All these appointment reminders, I love that.
Hmm.
That's great. Scheduling optimization, it helps the whole communication for not just complying, right? Not just getting people to comply with the program, but to keep people on track because we're so distracted nowadays. This does a really nice job. And finally, obviously, with like revenue cycle, when it comes to billing, if you're underbilling, we love doing that. We always hear the bad stories. We always hear the bad stories of people getting caught and making the front headline news. But a lot of us underbill because we're so kind, we're so generous. It could detect kind of denial, uh, if there's a certain pattern, right? A lot of times we get stuck in patterns. I told you, even myself, every like 3 months, you'd be in the same rut of billing the same type of thing, creating the same
Sure.
sentences. Um, so looking at behavior, this takes that human element out of it and say, hey, by the way, this is what's happening objectively. It's not my opinion. This is just what you're objectively doing. And so, by the way, it's a great way to measure performance. So with those performance evaluations, there's no like awkward, hey, let's come in
Mm-hmm.
and discuss this. It's just simply, here are the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about those numbers. Um, to avoid certain mistakes, here's where practices get into trouble. So don't expect perfection. People make mistakes, and so do AI models. So when you're reviewing your notes, you got to see if it's accurate. You're still going to save like a tremendous amount of time. It's really good. The AI is very good at generating information, but identical notes, I can tell you, Adam, is a huge red flag, massive. So they're able, just like we're able to make all this fantastic content, but if it's repetitive in nature, it's just going to get flagged so quickly. So many AI platforms, they're not automatically compiled. So you have to do check. You do have to ask about what their security standards are. Um, Maybe there's like contractual protections that you have to do. So everyone's shouting, even at CSM, everyone's shouting about how AI is going to impact everything. And honestly, maybe that's true. But if you want to be successful, in my opinion, you have to apply the same standards to AI that you would for any other program or operation, hands down, which is simply it goes with defining the purpose of what you're trying to do. You have to establish governance. You have to train and educate your staff. You got to obviously monitor that. And then you have to audit it on a routine basis. So as long as you're doing the same thing you would do for any other operation, you're going to be just fine. And maybe one day, like when you're listening to this and listening to recording, um, maybe it's just my perspective now. But I don't know any therapist who's out there and thinks, you know what I know now is all that's needed to help my patients improve. There's nothing better that I could offer,
Mm-hmm.
possibly, right? I know the most, nothing ever will be better. Um, so my message that kind of took home on the plane from CSM was like, the profession, it is doing well, even with all the negativity. Students are very, I usually stay away from these types of gatherings of tons of students. They're very enthusiastic. And outpatient therapists, they're really at the tip of the profession and they take on all the necessary risks when you see it like this, when you see it come into play. And when you do combine the compliance and like the operations and all that clinical decision making that's necessary, you'll see that the growth is possible when you have the right pieces in place. And it was so evident to me after coming out of a couple of days of listening to all the smart people out there and all these hot topic buttons that staff are talking about, burnout and audits and administrative chaos and reimbursements and on and on, and how that directly is correlated. I think if you're using AI, you're going to outperform those who are not. And it's just that simple. So there's really great ways to do it. There's really great tools out there that have AI embedded in it. And it's rapidly advancing. And I think it's a shame that people are so hesitant, even though, the upside, in my opinion, there's so many great boundaries that you could stay within, that it's really, there's no reason not to be taking that on right now.
100%. Yeah, as I thought about kind of listened to you speak, and I kind of thought about my experience with AI, my relationship. I think, like most people, I initially had this kind of over dependence on AI. Like, oh, I'm just gonna like give all the reasoning away, and like, I made the same mistake we all do, right? Um,
You still
oh,
got to
it
think.
wasn't me, it was AI that did that. That was, right? Like, I'm not responsible for that. So I will agree that I had that initial reaction, and now I understand, right? So we've rolled out AI in our business, and we've had to actually train our therapists that like, hey, this isn't a tool that allows you to just like this isn't the wild wild west anymore. Like, you're still responsible for whatever you put in your note. And I think that if you approach AI just like you would with anything, with a level of professionalism and responsibility, then you can use it
Exactly.
as a tool. But if you're going to be careless and reckless, then maybe grow up a little bit more first, right? Don't be like me. Uh, Daniel, thank you for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for the doing these 5 episodes. For those that are listening, if you're on the podcast, you can check them out on our YouTube channel. They're going to be posted in our Facebook group. And if you need compliance work in your business, check out Daniel Hirsch with Risk and Compliance Analytics. Daniel, see you next time, man.
Thanks, Adam.
Peace.